Hey guys, Corona Bry here. It is Thursday. We're looking at April 16, about 3 p.m. Just wanted to touch base on a few things and note a couple things. We do have a lot of misinformed and uneducated individuals on a massive scale, including media and including people of the government. Now, with that said, people are so focused on masks and hand sanitizer and social distancing and all this, which is great if you want to be safe. It will help, but that's all secondary. Your primary defense is your immune system. People are just simply not educated. If you're immunodeficient, suppressed, have an autoimmune disorder, or unhealthy immune system, if you have primary or secondary immunodeficiency, then you should be in heightened alert and should take precaution regarding the coronavirus. If not, your immune system will fight this off perfectly fine, just like it fights off the flu in a healthy, normal individual. You keep that in mind. So the primary protection, focus, and activity should be your health. Strengthening your immune system. Eat an apple a day. Fruits and vegetables. Exercise. Multivitamins. Superfood. Herbs. This will give you optimal health to fight off all types of foreign invaders, viruses, and the coronavirus. So if people would just shift their focus on educating themselves, gaining knowledge, understanding pathology, understanding health science, anatomy, medical knowledge, we'll be able to handle this much better with less panic, hysteria, fear, and what's going on. Anyhow, an apple a day will keep the doctor away. So keep that in mind. But on that note, on immunodeficiency disorders, I'm going to proceed over to immunological studies. And if you want to join, feel free, join.
Like any rather complicated machine, and the immune system consists of quite a lot of different cells and molecules, and they have to interact in various ways, things can go wrong sometimes in the immune response, and you can end up with immunodeficiency, a deficient immune response. Sometimes this is due to external agents, and in that case we refer to secondary immunodeficiency. But now we're going to discuss primary immunodeficiency. So primary immunodeficiency is defective immunity that is due to either an inherited or an acquired gene defect. The distribution of cellular primary immunodeficiency defects is that around about half of them are caused by defects in B cells and therefore in antibody production. Around about 20% of primary immunodeficiency defects are combined T and B cell defects. Approximately 20% affect the phagocytic cells. And around about 10% affect just the T cells without affecting other parts of the immune response. The consequences of primary immunodeficiency are that we see opportunistic infections. These are infections that most of us, most of the time, not really troubled by. We will deal with them perfectly adequately. But in patients with primary immunodeficiency, these infectious agents take the opportunity of the fact that there is a defective immune response to establish disease. The type of infections actually reflects the defect. So a defect in phagocytic cells will result in a different spectrum of infections to, for example, a defect in B lymphocytes. Immunodeficiency affecting T cells results in predominantly intracellular infections, for example, viruses, mycobacteria, and so forth. Whereas immunodeficiency affecting phagocytic cells and B cells and complement mainly results in extracellular bacteria. A little bit of background about primary immunodeficiency. Most primary immunodeficiencies are caused by an inherited gene defect, although, as already mentioned, some are due to spontaneous mutations. The inheritance may be autosomal recessive, in other words, both copies need to be defective, or autosomal dominance, where only one copy needs to be defective. Others are X-linked, and therefore more common in boys than girls. The severity will vary depending on the nature of the mutation. These diseases tend to manifest themselves in infancy. The vast majority of them are inherited gene defects. Therefore, you tend to pick them up in the early years of life. When infants are a few months or 1 or 2 years old, they'll keep getting recurrent infections, they'll be investigated for this, and in some of those individuals, they will be found to have a primary immunodeficiency. Most primary immunodeficiencies have a low prevalence. They're fairly rare diseases, generally speaking. However, the study of primary immunodeficiencies has provided valuable insights into individual components of the immune response. So although they're relatively uncommon, it's enabled us to answer questions about how the immune system functions, because we can identify individuals that have one particular component of the immune system that is dysfunctional due to these inherited gene defects. As already mentioned, quite a few primary immunodeficiencies are caused by genes that are present in the X chromosome, and therefore these diseases are more common in boys. And here is a list of some of the X-linked primary immunodeficiencies. And as you can see, there are a number of these, and we will be discussing some of these a little later in this lecture. Examples of primary immunodeficiencies that affect the innate response include complement deficiencies, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, hereditary angioedema, chronic granulomatous disease, myeloperoxidase deficiency, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, the leukocyte adhesion deficiency, Chedia-Higashi syndrome, and a number of auto-inflammatory disorders. Looking at complement deficiencies, any one of the many different complement components can be affected. For example, if there is a defective gene encoding the complement components C1q, C1r, C1s, C2, C3, C4, or factor I, there will be impaired clearance of immune complexes. And this can result in the condition systemic lupus erythematosus, which is an autoimmune disease. And typical infections seen when there is deficiency of these particular complement components include a number of pyogenic bacteria. Deficiencies in the later complement components, C6, C5, C6, C7, C8, C9, factor D, properdin, this will lead to a range of other types of infections, particularly disseminated Neisseria infections. MASP2 deficiency, one sees an increased incidence of Streptococcus pneumoniae, and in mannose binding lectin deficiency, which has quite a high prevalence for primary immunodeficiency. In fact, it's one of the most prevalent primary immunodeficiencies. There is usually no consequence. So most people with mannose binding lectin deficiency don't even know they've got it. And the same is true of another relatively common primary immunodeficiency, which is selective IgA deficiency. Again, usually other parts of the immune response compensate for the lack, and one doesn't see a greatly increased incidence of particular infections.